Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we have Professor Rosanna Garcia, the Paul R. Beswick Professor for Innovation and Entrepreneurship for our seminar. Professor Garcia is the Paul R. Beswick Professor for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at WPI. She has previously held tenured positions at North Carolina State University and Northeastern University in Boston, as well as visiting positions at the University of Münster in Germany and the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Her innovation research includes benefit corporations in a variety of industries, including the maritime, nanotechnology, wine, and alternative fuel vehicle industries. She believes in theory and practice, evidenced by co-founding and running 2 technology-based startups as the CEO. And also, she has worked in the telecommunications industry for 10 years prior to joining academia, and was awarded 3 patents for this time in the industry. Dr. Garcia holds a BS in chemical engineering and a BA in business economics, both from the University of California at Santa Barbara, and an MBA from the University of Rochester, and a PhD in marketing and innovations from Michigan State in East Lansing, Michigan. Her talk today is Innovation for Marketability, and we welcome you for this presentation.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's all right. I'm going to start sharing screen. There we go. All right, thanks everyone. I think I kind of need to stand behind the podium so that, but I may walk off. And for those of you who are on Zoom, I just tend to walk when I talk. So it's not that I'm ignoring you, but I will try and stay in front of the camera. So thank you, Adam, for inviting me to come and speak. And so I have explained quite a bit of experience in regards to entrepreneurship. And I have been working with, it's hundreds of teams now. So either student teams, faculty teams, community teams. I also am it's I-Corps, which is Spark. I don't know if you might have heard of that, which is the NSF. And so I am a advisor with that program. And that is where the I-Corps program, I'll explain briefly later. A few of Dr. Powell's companies have gone through I-Corps, but I'm now one of the advisors for that, and we'll be working with an additional number of teams from around from the country. And so, while I'm talking, I really want you to ask questions. Basically, that's what I'd like you to do. And so I'll just kind of jump into what I wanted to talk about. And so innovating for marketability, commercializing your innovation, these are pretty much, it's the same thing. But I can pretty much tell you, if this is all we talk about today, this is the main key information that I do want you to have, is that to commercialize your innovation is that you have to invent something that's of value to somebody else that they're willing to pay for it. And that's basically about it, is that when you're innovating, it just has to be something of value. And so this is actually one of the definitions, and I know that Kurt Carlson has been in to talk to you. He briefly talked about the difference between an invention and an innovation. And I also then want to talk about, well, then if it's an innovation, then what is something that becomes valuable enough that you would get venture capital funding from that? And so I've kind of hit on those points today. An invention is what? You guys tell me. I know you've been asked before, but what's an invention? Come on, you're all smart people. I know you're not shy. Yeah.
Well, it has to be novel.
Case novel what?
And then it has to be, it also has to have some sort of use.
Okay, so a novel idea. Yeah, how about in the chat too? You can answer there. And I'll take a look at it. So Brandon said you can't see, but you can see the slides now, right? Yeah, okay, great. So in the chat too, you can answer the question. So it's a novel idea. What else is an invention? Do you guys invent in the lab? No? Then what are you guys doing in the lab? If you're not inventing. So what are you guys doing in the lab? Experimenting, okay. And as you experiment, you're coming up with new ideas, new concepts. Do you call that inventing? Are you inventing when you're in the lab experimenting? Yeah, you guys, you're inventing. That's what you're doing. You're in the lab, you're trying out new things, you're experimenting with different things, and you're inventing. You're coming up with some new concepts, some new ideas that are novel, that haven't been experienced in the world before. So you're all inventors. So now what's an innovation?
Something that hasn't been done before.
Okay, let's throw into invention, something that hasn't been done before. So what makes innovation different than invention? Yeah.
Well, innovation, going back to
Kurt Carlson, yeah.
Kurt Carlson said innovation is something that is useful for other people.
Yeah.
Not just something that's novel.
Yeah, and that's it. And so it is useful for somebody else, and that's where the value comes in. So that you need, an innovation is taking your ideas out of the lab, and an innovation is when you actually put them into the marketplace and you have somebody who values your inventions so that they're willing to pay for it. That is what the definition of an innovation is. It's something that can be commercialized. So there are different types of inventions, and this is what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Was so basic research. This is what you guys are doing, and some of that basic research is going out and it does become innovation. And we know that the basic research is happening in research divisions and academia. It's displayed through conferences, and the definition of a basic research innovation really is around that the domain is not well defined, and neither is the problem. And so you are working in the lab on completely new ideas, novel things that haven't been done before, and you're working in a realm, but it is not well defined. There are breakthrough innovations, and breakthrough innovations are where the domain is not well defined, but the problem is. And some example, I think a really great example of that actually happens to be Los Alamos. Everybody familiar with Los Alamos and what was going on there? Yes, no? Yes? No, not everybody. Okay, so Los Alamos was a research lab in New Mexico where they were working on the atomic bomb. And that was their primary goal. The problem was they wanted to build an atomic bomb so that they could fight the Japanese. Well, very, very well-defined problem. Nobody knew how to get there. Nobody really knew what to do. So they put together, and so a skunk works is a group of people that are set off from other researchers, and they go and they try different things. They're experimenting, but they have a very clear problem that they're trying to solve. We also call this open innovation, and that's what they were doing in Los Alamos. Open innovation is this idea of sharing your knowledge and opening it up to anybody, opening it up to competitors, opening it up to other researchers. And so this is what open innovation does. A more recent example of a breakthrough innovation would be around our COVID vaccines, right? Very, very clear problem. Nobody really knew how to solve this particular problem, so they had to start working together. And that's what happened is research was being done. This is the problem we're trying to solve, and we are going to get there, and we have to get there. And so that is an example of a more recent breakthrough innovation. Then there are sustaining innovations, and sustaining innovations we also call incremental. And an incremental innovation is those small add-ons that are being done, that are put out into the marketplace. And you can think of actually I was talking to my daughter and I said, oh, my phone won't do this. Well, she says, of course it won't, Mom. You have an iPhone 7. I said, that iPhone 7's not old. She says, yes, it is. They're on 14 now. I'm like, oh, all right. So those are incremental innovations from, 7, 8, 9, 10. They keep on adding different functions to your iPhones. So that is considered an incremental innovation. The disruptive innovations are this is for the VC. So venture capital model is one of the things they call it. Lean Launchpad, I'll talk a little bit more about Lean, but the 15-20 rule is something that comes out of, it really started at 3M in Minnesota, and it was adopted by Google, which says that 15% or 20% of every employee's time is spent working on different ideas. And it doesn't matter what it is, but if it's something of interest, they can go ahead and work on it, and they're actually required to. So during their employee reviews, they're asked, what are you doing with your 15% of your time? Or what are you doing with your 20% of the time? I believe that they say that Gmail came out of this. There's some really basic Google tasks that we do now that came out of this 15-20 rule. And what a disruptive innovation, a good example of that happens to be Netflix. So why would we say that Netflix is disruptive? So the definition is that the domain is very well defined, but the problem isn't. When Netflix first came out, who was its major competitor? Blockbuster, right? Did the Americans, consumers, think that they had a problem? No, there wasn't a problem. There wasn't a well-defined problem. And so, but what did Netflix do that they offered that ended up becoming disruptive? They did actually a couple of things. What did they do that was different than Blockbuster? You get your movies through the mail. And so that really changed the way that people were starting to view movies. Then what did they do next? And they almost went under on this one. What did they do next? Somebody else. Adam, if you can monitor the chat too and see if anybody has answers there, that would be great. I could tell my students, I'll call on you. Everybody knows, what did Netflix do after their DVDs in the mail? What was their next step? Streaming. When they went out with streaming, they introduced streaming and they almost lost their business because so many people were set on, no, I want my DVDs by mail. I'm not going to go streaming. Streaming sucks. And it did at the time. The technology wasn't quite there yet. But Netflix had this vision is that we know streaming is going to get better over time. And so we are going to introduce that into the marketplace. And that has changed dramatically. And that's why we call it disruptive. It has changed dramatically the way that you view movies. It's also changed, actually, and this wasn't predicted, Hollywood, right? Netflix is now making the movies. They're making the content where they used to stream other people's content. Now they're making the content. So they have disrupted actually two different industries. And they're probably working on disrupting something else. So they actually, I've been always impressed. I've been following along what they were doing. When they introduced streaming, I was like, oh my God, I know what they're doing. They're going to try and be disruptive. And even though the regular marketplace didn't understand that, those are innovating and saying, let's see what happens. And that's kind of what you do with the disruptive innovation. This is really interesting. There's the tech behind it. Let's see what happens. Another example, again, more recent, is Bitcoin. What industry has Bitcoin disrupted? What industry? Cash payments. Yep, definitely. And cash payments, and that's part of what industry? Finance, banking. They have really disrupted the finance and the banking industry. And so there is a point, and I didn't look it up. Anybody know what recent countries are starting to use Bitcoin as one of their main currencies? I know there was some countries that actually were moving in that direction. And so there are now a group of people who only move money around on Bitcoin. They store their money instead of in a bank, they're storing it on Bitcoin. They make payments through Bitcoin instead of using a credit card. And so this is really beginning to disrupt that industry. And the banking industry is taking notice. And they're saying, okay, what do we have to do to keep on top of this? How many of you guys are investing in Bitcoin? You're all students. No extra funds to do that. I will tell you, it's one of those. I don't know which way it's going. So every month I throw a little bit into Bitcoin, because if it ends up going in that direction, at least I have some Bitcoin that I can begin to work with. So those are the disruptive innovation. Sorry. What kind of innovation was this? And one of the reasons why I bring it up, you know that it started here at WPI. Dean Kamen was here. Yeah. What kind of innovation was this? Is it incremental? You do thumbs up, thumbs down. Incremental. Thumbs down. No. Is it so that's the incremental sustaining. Is it a research lab invention? Probably not. Maybe there was some new technology there, but it wasn't a major change in technology. Was it disruptive? I think they were trying. I think they were trying to be disruptive. So what happened? Why do you think that it ended up failing? Why do you think it failed? I mean, these are the things that you guys should actually, if you're in the lab and you're inventing, people do it all the time. But why do some products, some inventions take off and why do some fail?
Did it fail, or did it just succeed for other companies?
It pretty much failed. So after he died, and you all know how he died, he was on a Segway and fell. Yeah. That's what. Yeah, didn't he? No, somebody died. I remember this. Somebody in that time period. It was really bad marketing. So my bad. Somebody did die though. Who was it? No, there was a death involved at some point in time. Because again, I was following this and like, okay, there's a death, and my bad, it wasn't Dean Kamen, but somebody did die, and that was really bad marketing. And after that, it just all kind of went downhill after that.
Sure this wasn't QAnon or something, because I heard the same rumor in France a couple of years ago.
No. It was before. This was way 5 years ago, more than that, something. Okay, so way before the pandemic. Yeah, and there was also Bush fell. You remember that one? Bush fell off of it. So, anybody ever tried it? Yeah. That's was it proven? That's who it was. Okay. That's right. That's what happened. Thank you for reminding me. The company got sold, and that was, yep, that's who it was. So it wasn't Dean Kamen, but it was the CEO at the time. Yeah, that's there. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for Ellen for getting me right on track. I knew there was something that was really bad publicity. And go ahead.
As I understood, they were trying to make a wheelchair that would allow you to stand up if you were mobile. And that was just too expensive. Our healthcare system won't support that kind of stuff for paralyzed people. So they were trying to figure out what to do with it. They came up with this. They thought, that might be nice for short commutes and stuff. But the problem is it's hard to take into your office. So you'd much rather have one of these funny skateboards or something.
Yeah, one of the funny skateboards or the one-wheel rollers that we see around campus all the time.
Yeah, you saw people use them for a while, but there instead of you can rent a scooter that you can fold up.
Mall Cop was the name of that movie? Was it called Mall Cop? That was.
Oh yeah, they have the segways.
Yeah, it had the segways. That was the big thing. So what happened on this one is the technology was good. The market wasn't ready and the market didn't know what to do with it. And there were stories that people would take it out and they'd be on the sidewalk and then they'd get ticketed because they're on their sidewalk. Then they'd go into the roadway and then the next block they get ticketed because they're in the roadway and not on the sidewalk. There was no regulations that could help to take this product out into the marketplace. So this was really more of a not the right value. There wasn't the right value. There wasn't enough value, and there wasn't a really well-defined customer. Here's another one. Nobody died from this one that I know of. Why did this one not take off? Cool inventions. It's actually an innovation, right? It made it to the marketplace. It was being sold. So why not? Why does nobody need it? And I agree with you. Very few people, the people that did adopt it, we call them early adopters. And so there will be a group called early adopters that will adopt the innovation because they're interested in it. They're the ones that are interested in technology. They want to try new things. And so that's a whole nother lecture on what happens on who the adopters are. But this one was early adopters. So they did sell it in the marketplace. Essentially, again, there wasn't a well-defined need and they weren't able to place it into a category that people really understood why I would want to have this. And it became a privacy issue because of the ability to videotape. And so those were some of the issues that came into play on this one. I thought this one was a fascinating one. QR codes were considered a failure. Time said in 2017, very big in Asia, but they were not being used here in the United States. So what happened? Why? How many of you guys have used a QR code this week? Yeah, like more than half of us, right? More than half. Some of you aren't saying you did, and you did. What happened? Did the technology change? No. Go ahead. Became a need. There became a need for it that was valued. And it had actually a very high value, right? And so what was the need? What was the need? Yeah, it was COVID. Is that there was a need because, again, wasn't really well known how this disease was being transferred. So they thought, like many flu symptoms, it was being transferred by people by touching. And the QR codes was a way that menus went out, access to information. You didn't have to share this type of material. And so it was a way of reducing this transmission of a disease. So there became a real valid need for this particular product. So I introduced these to you just to kind of get you thinking, inventions, really cool inventions, but is there a need? And maybe the need is not immediate. And that, like Netflix, they had a vision. This is what we think we can solve, and this is the problem we can solve, even though consumers don't think so quite yet. With the QR codes, there wasn't as strong of a need that people were willing to pay for it. And so that is where the primary difference comes in. The restaurants are paying for the QR code to link over to their websites. So there is somebody paying for these, not you, the consumer. And so again, there needs to be some kind of value around it that people will understand it, and the market shifts. So moving from the lab to the market, again, just some things that to think about. And this is called the business model canvas. And this is introduced in the I-Corps program. Has any of your students been through the I-Corps program here? Okay, a couple of you have. So you're familiar with this. You know what this is. And so we do start all entrepreneurs who are thinking about how do I take my invention and make it into an innovation, we like to start them here with the business model canvas. Just yesterday, I got an email request from a group of IQP students. We need help on a business plan. My response to them is that business plans aren't used as often in entrepreneurship. When you're talking to VCs, they're not going to ask for a business plan. They will ask to see your business model canvas. And the reason for that is that as soon as your business plan is written, it'll be obsolete. And the business model canvas allows you to very quickly change what's going on. Now, business plans are used, and they're mainly used by banks, the small business, SBA loans. They'll ask for a business plan. And so they are sometimes used. But in general, we start here. And the reason when we start here, and those in the I-Corps program are going to know, they've seen this. We start with what is the value proposition? What does value mean? Do you value your iPhone? Okay, not as much as you should, but you have one. So you have some value for it, which means that you're getting some benefit, and that you're willing to pay for that benefit. And even though there's some downside costs, like you say, you don't maybe value it as much as you should. I actually hate my phone. I really do. And my family is always angry at me because you didn't pick up your phone. Yeah, I know. But I still buy it. I still pay for it because there's some benefits to me, and I'm willing to pay for it, even though there are costs. And so that's what value is do my benefits outweigh my costs? And if the answer is yes, then there is value. And so we are always talking to our companies about what is the value that you are delivering. And this is actually not an easy answer for people. It's I work with companies that have been around for 10 years, and they still can't tell me what their value proposition is. And so this is something I do work on with them is, okay, let's work out your value prop. And I'm working with a team right now, and she's been around for 3 years, and she's in the I-Corps program. And we are just now, this is her second time through the I-Corps program, just now really identifying what her value is and why people are willing to pay for what she has to offer. So it's not easy to do, but it is crucial. And that was something that Kirk Carlson shared with you, is that you've got to find where the value is and what you're doing if you want to take your innovations out of the lab and into the marketplace. And then the question becomes, who values this? And that's the who is here on the other side. The customers. How do I distribute this? And the other side is, well, what is it going to take me to get it out into the marketplace? And so this is the other side of the business model canvas. And that's why the value prop is in the middle, is who a value to whom, and how am I going to get this product to these people that value what I have to offer. And then I don't know why my students get confused what profit is. You're trying to generate revenues, but you have some costs. And the difference, of course, is profits, and you want to make profit. This next slide, I'll share these slides with you, but just wanted to throw it up so that you do have it. That if you want to get into it, these are the questions that we ask ourselves when we get into each of these boxes. And you can see then how the business model comes alive. This is what we do in the business school, is we help our entrepreneurs take their inventions and wrap up the business model around it, which is, how are you going to make money? And if you're going to make money, that means you have to have a value to a certain customer segment. And that's what we help them to do. What's your value prop, and how are you going to put this together? This is available on, this one was some startup. I think, I don't know if did I put the source on the other one? Yeah, strategizer.com is the company that came up with the business model canvas, and you can go there at any time and download that. But there are different types of value. And so this is something else that Adam asked me to kind of touch upon a little bit, is the idea called the triple bottom line. You've heard of it? Some people, most people haven't. Okay, so the triple bottom line is a way of approaching business. And what it says is that I am not solely going to focus on profits. In my company, I am going to focus on also people and the planet. And because of that, what happens is that there's a whole different set of stakeholders that we have to take in consideration as we put together our business model canvas. They call this that sustainability. And so sustainability is actually comes from two different ways. Sustainability, when you think about sustainability, what first thing that comes to mind for you? Environmental sustainability. Yep. And very, very closely tied to that actually is firm sustainability. And so if you're an oil company, what do you think the life of your company is going to be? It's a finite. And so as soon as my resources are gone, which is why there's environmental sustainability, all those resources are gone, do I actually have a business? And so this is what this allows companies to think about. I want sustainability for the long term. And that means there's certain resources that are available and some of them that are not. The EV industry is in this situation already. And there are only limited amount of resources in the world. I mean, there's a lot, but it is limited on the types of minerals that you need to build batteries. And so these are some things I think you guys are working on in the lab, right? Coming up with alternatives to that. And that is something that's really important. It's going to be crucial for the long-term sustainability of these companies that are out there, automobile companies. So extremely important to think about. I have an example for you. It's not tech, but you guys, you know this? Yeah, Nespresso, you use them. Yeah. And what's the problem with them? Yeah. Waste. Huge amounts of waste. And so they got a lot of backlash about the amount of waste that gets generated. And so if you look at their business model canvas, it makes complete sense. Yep. Well, the value they're providing, which actually was high-end restaurant quality espresso to the home. And they have membership clubs, but not just clubs with individual consumers, but also in the office place. The channels, I mean, how do I distribute from one place to the next? We're very clear how we do this. They had call centers, but you can also start in retail, and they very well defined who their market was, the office market and household markets. So easy to see how you could make money, easy to see what the costs were. But then they had to say, okay, what is really my impact on the environment? And so there is a separate business model canvas that has you focus on where is the environmental impact and what is the functional value that I am providing. And so when you look at espresso, the functional value is just what they're doing is they're providing coffee on a daily basis to a group of people that enjoy coffee. But when you start to peel that away, what they look at is your life cycle assessment. You guys work with life LCAs? Yeah. No, some people do, some don't. Okay. So in their life cycle assessment, what they do is they start from production to end of life. And so it's easy to see what the production is going to be, all the materials that you have to go into making machines and these pods and the coffee, all of that is your production. Also, then what's the energy that's used from going from the factory to the retail, then the retail to the home, and what happens at the home. And many companies are starting to do these types of life cycle assessments. And what they find often is, and actually the laundry detergent is a really good example of this, is that most of the energy and water use is at the consumer end. It's how the consumers use the product. And that's what they found here. Cup washing. Cup washing takes 28%, and they broke it down in terms of the carbon footprint. So looking at water footprint, carbon footprints are the two primary ones, energy use footprint. But it was the cup washing that was involved. And then your preparation with your water, your energy. So most of the resources were being used at the consumer's end. And so what these companies then begin to do in their innovation, which is incremental, how do we improve upon that so that it doesn't have a big impact at the end? And one of the things, laundry detergent, I think, is a great one. You guys probably don't know this, but laundry detergent came in big bottles, and it was mostly made out of what, Ellen? Remember? Anybody? What was it mostly made out of? Water. Yep. And so this is what they did is they made it. Now it's concentrated. And I say most of you guys have only known the concentrated stuff. There's a few of us from back. Sorry, Ellen, didn't mean to age you. That remember the big bottles. And so they went down and they said, okay, we can take the water out. We can reduce the size, which helps around along the entire distribution path, less energy because I'm not transporting heavy water. And also, but they had to retrain the consumer. And so all your caps are, this is how much you need to use. That was because there was a switch. Also on the recyclability of products, packaging. So a lot of things go into evaluating this whole life cycle assessment from an environmental perspective. But then there's, I wanted to introduce this to you real quick. Design for environment. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways. I'm definitely not going to get into it, but if it's something that is interest to you, I really highly recommend Fiscal's book. I've used his book, and I think he's the go-to person when you're really looking at designing for environment. I wrote a chapter. I used his framework and came up with this particular analysis of what he was doing. But it's not just about So that was dematerialization. Detoxification is another one. Revalorization, I'm going to talk about what that is next. And capital protection and renewal. These are all different ways that you can design with a sustainability impact. This is revalorization, which is upcycling. You guys have heard of upcycling. So Adidas taking plastic out of the ocean and making shoes from it. Southwest took their chairs from the airplane seats, and another company was making luggage out of it. Here's our life cycle assessment, and there's something called cradle to cradle. Have you heard that particular term too? Okay, so cradle to cradle just basically says at the end of a life of a product, then it goes, all the parts go back into the system again and continues, and that's why it's called cradle to cradle as opposed to cradle to grave. Most innovations in the consumer market, probably all markets, are cradle to grave. Cradle to cradle is not easy to do because most products are made out of, there's a bio part of it, and there's also the techno side of it. And so particularly on the technology side, how do you take everything that's there and begin to recycle it? So one example, very simple example, is shirts. T-shirts now are being made so you can throw them in the compost. There is, I don't know if you've ever seen these toothbrushes out there, but what they do is Whole Foods has partnered with Preserve that your yogurt cups get thrown away at Whole Foods. Whole Foods delivers the yogurt cups to Preserve, and they make toothbrushes out of it. After you're done with the toothbrush, you mail it back to Preserve, and they actually make picnic benches out of your old toothbrushes. Now, what they do after that, I don't know, which is it's very hard to continue to do because, as you know, material degradation over time. And this is some of the things you guys are working on. I know you are, to make it better out there. So you all know Ascend. Yes, it's used to be battery resources. And this is what they have focused on, right? Is this closed loop battery supply chain, and taking the materials out of the batteries and reusing them and making them better. So you can begin to see there's a real value there. And I don't know, but this says 70 million. Ellen, do you know how much they've raised lately? I think it's over 100. Sorry? Yeah, I know I'm sure it's over 100 million now that they've recently raised because there's value. And so, kind of going back to who are VCs going to invest in 100 million is that there is a very clear value proposition with a well-defined problem. And all they care about, and VCs have a bad rap and they should, all they care about is making money. And so, but this is what they're looking for, really well, clear domains with clear problems that we can make money off of. And this is one of them, but this is one of them that's focused on sustainability. All right, and so then there's the social side of it. And if you take your business model canvas and you take apart, it really begins to look at what is my social impact that I'm having. And so the social impact of these coffee pods are immense amounts of waste. It impacts some communities more than others. And to really looking at what are the benefits that I'm providing and what are the impacts. And so that's where the people side come in. Profit, planet, and people. I introduced these couple of companies to you because these are student companies that I work with. And Aurora Global is what she does. She had a very, very well-defined problem. She's from India. And as you may have heard, in some areas of India, there is issues with violence against women. And so what she wanted to do was, and she designed a lantern that was solar powered and to put it out there into the villages. And she did. And she received a lot of grant money from that. Actually, PepsiCo gave her quite a bit of money to go out and do this. But that model was not sustainable. And so what she has then, and we call it the pivot, what she's moved into now is these solar panels and getting women in the community to help actually build these solar panels that then go out into other communities. So she was at Babson, and she is still, now she's in North Carolina, I think in North Carolina, but doing her work in India. So there's an example of a very, very well-defined problem in a domain, but it wasn't quite the value that somebody was willing to pay for it. They are willing to pay for these solar panels. The other example here is a Greenhouse Ventures. And this was a student of mine over at Northeastern. And he started out with the mechanical engineers, with the MEs, because his well-defined problem was that the Cameroonians couldn't get their produce to the market because of the quality. And they were competing against the French grocery market. So what he did on his first attempt, again, well-defined problem, he knew what he needed to do. And with mechanical engineers, he came up with a drying device that would hold to the quality. They went to Cameroon and they couldn't get it distributed. There, again, there wasn't a high enough value. So he came back to Northeastern. I continued to work with him. Now he went back to Cameroon, and this has been like 10 years now. And he started to build greenhouses made out of plastic and wood. And that's what you see here, is his greenhouses. And now, instead of controlling the end of the product, he's controlling the growing process. And these greenhouses are being used around Cameroon. They have changed the agriculture in Cameroon. They're now being offered in prisons. The prisons are growing, and he has sensed what he's done is realized that there are not any entrepreneurship is not something that's really thought about in Cameroon. So he started a university on entrepreneurship. And so I hope to go and visit him and teach a class over there in the summer. So we'll see if that happens. But I bring these, yeah.
You encourage us to speak up.
Yes, yes.
And I like all these examples. Thank you for the presentation. I've got a different problem though that doesn't seem to fit into this.
Yep, tell me. I want to hear it.
One of my goals since I came to WPI was to invent things and start things out. And I worked particularly in sports engineering.
Okay.
And with students who would come up with a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
But that could save ACLs of people skiing, people playing basketball and soccer. And I noticed with the skiing ones, I tried to go to the ski bike companies, and I know people there. I've been going to conferences with them and presenting on the technology and how this works since 1983 when I was a graduate student at nowhere. My theory is, and I want to rethink of this, is that these companies are no longer run by the people whose names are on them. They're run by a bunch of MBAs who are very risk adverse and work for larger companies. They're only interested in moving up the corporate ladder and don't want to buy into something that might not work.
Mhm.
As a result, every 2,000 days, every 2,000 skier days, we turn on the ACL.
Yep.
And we have patents that will
Yep.
almost eliminate that.
Yeah.
Most recently, we have every 2,000 times high school girl basketball player is on the court, she comes off without an ACL. We have a shoe that will prevent that. We have a startup company. We have a bunch of investment in it. We can't get investors.
Mhm.
WPI is crushing us with trying to collect money that's owed on the patents that WPI has. They emptied my accounts in mechanical engineering to try to recover from some of this. All my research had nothing to do with that. One day, all gone, no discussion. So we've got a difficult partner.
In WPI, okay.
WPI,
Yeah.
and we're running into the same problem.
Yep.
Like, and the thing again in sports engineering is, where's your epidemiological data? You know, we won't have, you know, like, how do you prove based on people using it that it's going to work? You can't get that until you get thousands of people using it. So we've got the social stuff. Actually, the way we're controlling the forces will increase the life of sneakers, or athletic shoes, which are pretty much gets useless after they're done. I don't know what you do with an old basketball shoe at the end of its life.
They recycle them, but yes, yeah.
Anyway,
And
so do you
yeah,
have any suggestions?
I do have suggestions, and that kind of leads to my next slide.
Oh,
And
good.
but no, I think it's a very important and very valid question. And what we have seen, and this is the very typical innovation process, right, is that you have an idea, you vet the concept, you get a team committed to making it happen, and then you go out into the market and you validate, is there a product market fit? And you identify that there is a product market fit out there, and then we try and put a business model around it. When you end up with partners that are draining you, and not a good thing. So what we are trying to, what we do, and this is what we're doing in the business development lab, and I have some slides about that. What we do in the lab there is, and certainly love to sit down with you and have some of our entrepreneurs and residents talk to you about your challenges. These are experienced guys that have been out in starting companies, been out in industry a whole bunch of times.
Well,
but
we have a startup with somebody from Wall Street, and his basic theme is to invest in intellectual property at universities. We think very much like Johns Hopkins.
Yeah. And so that's the model you're talking about here. I've got a great idea. I've got a concept around it. I've got somebody supporting
like
you.
$500 million, and we're having trouble with having up to the next million.
Yep. So what I'm going to challenge you, it just goes right back to the value proposition. I'm going to challenge you and say, I don't think you've got the right, there's a value there, but who's willing to pay for it? And that's what you haven't found yet.
We have. And
Okay.
our problem, I think, is communicating with them. Actually,
So
now I'm working on a letter to an NBA owner. His value proposition is he's got very expensive players who are sitting on the bench and throwing ACLs they wouldn't have if they were using our shoe.
how many of them have you sat down and talked to? The people that are
It's hard
buying.
to talk to an NBA owner. I don't know if you've tried. And
Actually,
we're-
there's connections, but
all right,
yes.
great. I would love to have some, but we've been trying. And the other value proposition is just like me, both of my children tore their ACLs. And you talk to anybody who's played high school basketball, and they all know someone's torn an ACL. And when a while ago, before Andy Barron left, we had a great press release. All kinds of people were calling me about how they'd like to be involved, and we weren't quite ready for that yet. Andy's gone. We're having trouble getting WPI to put out a press release. No problem to get their lawyers to try to crush us, but we are having trouble with press releases.
Sorry, we're nearing the end of the time for the seminar, so ask you to wrap up. I think there's usually another group in here at 1 o'clock.
So what, like I mentioned, so the business development lab, what we do in the lab, and like I say, what we do is we ask you to flip what you're doing, which is Instead of starting with your technology, you start with the customer. And you have some technology and you have the ideas. And actually, that was my previous slide, is that, and then I'll quickly get here, which is what we do is we flip it. We say, all right, you have to validate first. You've got to validate your technology first. And that means going out and doing customer discovery. And in the I-Corps program, that's what you've learned. That's what you do. And that's what you need to do first. That's what Kurt Carlson was telling you. You have to start and talk to the customers first. 30 of them is what we require you to go and talk to, even if they're hard to get. You have to go out and get what they value and what they're willing to pay for. And again, back to the first slide. They have to be willing to pay for what you have. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways of making that happen. We are going to run out of time. And so I'm just going to quickly go back here. And what if you have ideas, our Innovation Studio is for the students that are working on their ideas there. And the value creation, and that's Kurt Carlson and what he's helping our students do. And then there's the business school. And so in the business school, of course, we have all the entrepreneurship, all your business classes there. But what I recently started was a business development lab. And in the lab, we're doing exactly what I was just saying, is we help all our inventors take their inventions and understand where the value really is, and that's that value proposition in the middle. And once we have that value proposition in the middle, then we can really define what is the business model that goes around that. And that's what we work with our companies on doing. And they're all at various stages. And the second part of it is I have some other examples, but I'm going to run out of time, is that we are also have what we're calling Launch PI, WPI, and this is for companies that are in that stage that have their business model well defined. They may have some customers, now they need the funding. And so we'll be working with those companies to go out and be presented to the VCs. Also MBI, which is the Mass Biotech Initiative. We have other contacts around in the Worcester area that we put these companies in front of. And so I'm just really beginning to build up those relationships, but so we help our companies go through these steps. And Office of Technology and Commercialization sometimes gets involved. And then you become a partner with us. I mean, that's not all companies have to be a partner of WPI. There's various things that come into play with that, but it's not a requirement. And so I'll take these slides. Here is Flexbotics. I don't know if you know of them, but these are different examples of companies. They went through the I-Corps program. They have financial funding from WPI. And now what we're working with them, and this, like I said, the biggest thing that we find with these companies that are developed, they start with their technology and not with their customer. And so we're helping them to say, all right, here's your customer, and this is how your technology provides a value. I have Solar Tech here because I'm starting to also work with Mohammed and really beginning to understand what his technology is, but where's the value, and making it so working this pitch that can go in front of VCs and address the things they're interested in, why they want to invest in you. And I'm just going to wrap up with this case study, which is Gompy's goat cheese. Have you guys run into Gompy's? A few of you have seen Gompy's? Yep. And they are also in the business development lab. They are consumer focused, but we work with these students who want to try what is a business like and work with them through the steps of selling a product, getting it out into the market, doing everything around it. And so it doesn't matter what your idea is pretty much where we're at. If you have something that you think that you can commercialize, come to the business development lab and we'll help you do that. And we call it the lab. And it was really important that we call it the lab because it is a place where you go and you experiment. You try different things. Does this work? Does this not work? And there are, in experimenting, there's things that didn't work, but you learn something, right? Each step of the way. And that's what we consider in the business development lab. So thank you. Thanks, everyone online.
We definitely have questions.
time for a couple of questions. So does anybody have?
Quiet bunch.
Online, does anybody have? Oh, sorry, Maya, go ahead.
So if you want to start an idea, and one of the things that I expect that you would want is to have a team that you can rely on and you can work together. So how do you find those people, or like among your friends and people that you know, what are the criteria that you have to think about in choosing them?
Yes, so there's a whole bunch of studies have been done, and that's what we do in the business school. To narrow down very quickly, the basic thing is that you are looking for people that complement your skills. And so what are you missing that, and find people that can do that. Now, it also needs to be so complementary first, and then somebody you can work with second is what they find out. And so what we do in our Technology Advisors Network, which is something we are starting up again, is we put companies in front of mentors. And this is a way of actually finding mentors. They don't take ownership in your company, but they do help mentor you, and they do it. They're alums. They're just interested in wanting to do that. So this is another way through the Business Development Lab of finding mentors, maybe not necessarily partners, but those mentors could become partners and make introductions to people that could complement what you need in your company. Yeah.
What's your opinion on like SBI grants, stuff like that?
Yeah, so I have not worked with SBI grants in quite some time. And I actually think that they are a good way of getting some initial funding. And they don't take ownership, right? SBIR don't take any ownership. And so this is a place to use the money, I really believe, is in getting your inventions so you really understand where the value is at. So in general, I'm positive. If you can get them, you can do them, but you are partnering with another company. And so that partnership has to work well.
Any other questions?
Okay.
If not, then I'd like to thank our speaker today for the presentation, and we'll see you all next week. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks you.
Thank you.
Thank you.